Okay, so today we will do application of count min and count sketches, which we saw last week. Okay, so that's the plan for the day. And so first thing which we will see today is called range queries. But before that, let me recap what we did last time. Okay. Okay. So if you recall, in count min sketch, our objective was that you are basically you are given. So we are given a vector x bar, x1, x2, xn. So think of this as like x bar being like you're given an n-dimensional vector x bar in Rn, and each coordinate is being what do you call being incremented at in the stream. Okay, and what we were looking for, we wanted to get an estimate of each coordinate. So at the end, we were returning some xi tilde, which was like x1 bar, x2 bar, xn bar, right? This is what we were returning, and so this was our goal. Okay, but the count min sketch ran only in the setting where we assume that each xi x bar has a property that for all I, xi is greater than equal to 0 at the end. Right? In fact, at all intermediate step. Okay. So if I ask you a question, so for all I n, this is what we have set, right? So if I ask you, give me an look, I'm not going to store any of these things, right? Right? All I'm storing is this C. So how will you? So, but I'm storing this. What is that called? So what is the size of this? Okay, so this D cross W matrix. This is what you are storing. So if you want at any point of time, if you give me a question that please give me an estimate for xi tilde, what will I do? I will go through each hash function, look at which bucket it maps to, collect all those items, okay, and then take the minimum and return you. So this is what count min sketch or even count sketch will do. Okay, so now, so summarizing, what we proved actually is that if you take roughly log 1 over delta many, log 1 over delta many hash functions, then we can prove that for each coordinate I, probability that xi tilde, the estimate for xi, is not too far away from epsilon norm, like from one norm of x, holds with high probability. Okay. Okay. And then we wanted to do this not only for one coordinate, but we wanted to do this for all the n coordinates. And then rather than using log 1 over delta hash function, we used roughly 2 ln n hash functions. And that gave us the desired property that with probability 1 minus 1 by n, every coordinate has the property that it is within the required bound. Okay, so the total space this algorithm takes is like we have 1 over epsilon log n counters and amount of storage you need per bit. So for us, say if the length of the stream is m, then all we need is log n bits. Okay, so this is what is the storage for count min sketch. Count sketch was slightly different, and if you recall, count sketch works in any. So this is the one of the most generic sketch, and this works for x bar where it is truly x1 to xn is in r to the power n, and all what do you call? And all updates could be positive, negative. At the end, it is negative. It doesn't matter. And it was more like it was inspired from AMS sketch. So at each coordinate, again, like count min sketch, we have this d hash function h1 to hd, okay, dot, dot, dot. And but now you are not at every place, you are not storing the sum of the values xi comes, but a signed sum. And you also return a signed median for each xi tilde, okay? So now the counter values can become negative even if x is positive. And then we did this analysis, is that we said that, okay, if you, again, like before we showed that if you now, we say that, look, now you need, because we need Chebyshev, we say that the word number of the buckets we need is like 3 over epsilon square. If we want to guarantee that xi tilde, right, is within some range, like xi tilde is like xi minus something, xi plus something, where something is epsilon times second norm, then you need like the bucket size is like 3 over epsilon square. And then if we choose ln n times this, then again we were able to show that for every coordinate we can achieve that the estimate on xi tilde which we have is like epsilon times second norm. And again we need, now we need slightly more space, because now we need 1 over epsilon square log n counters. So 1 over epsilon square log n counters. So this is what we did last time, and we did analysis for this. What I want to do today is application. So if you have any questions about count sketch or count min sketch, please let me know. I think. Okay, so let me tell you the first application which I want to talk about today is range queries. So what is range queries? So range queries is slightly different in the sense that now what you're given, you will give me I comma j in n, and you would like to know xij. So what is xij? So I want the sum. So think that, remember, right? So we have been given this vector x1, x2, xn, right? This is our vector x, right? And now you give me some ith coordinate and some jth coordinate, and you ask me, please give me the sum of the frequencies or the sum of the values here. So this is what xij corresponds to. Now, some examples where this is used quite a lot is that, like in routing, right? I mean, you want to know, okay, because most of the addresses, like very few things will come. But when I collect these guys, like they'll say, look, give me all the things which I have seen, like packets which have passed with between this IP address and this IP address, right? So it's a very natural question. In database, you would like to know the record within some range. Or, for example, like also like some discretization of signal values and things like that. So what I mean by signal value, so I will come to that. So this is largely also used in signal processing and all, which we will touch a little bit towards the end today or maybe next lecture. Okay, but so you would have seen this range queries quite a lot, but here are some few examples where it is quite useful. Now, notice that one way, so how can you give me this range queries? Okay, so here are some trivial ways of doing this. I will tell in a minute. So what we would like to create is a data structure that can answer range queries for in given range that is chosen after the sketch is done. Okay, so there could be omega n square potential queries depending on which sum of frequencies you would like to get from me. But what is our goal? Our goal is, can we solve it quickly? Okay, can it be solved space efficiently? And can it be solved with high accuracy? Okay, so can you tell me one trivial solution for this? Or simple solution? Anybody?
You use the sketch and just make queries on the sketch.
Yes, so that's definitely one good way of doing it. Yes. So so let's see what are the possible. One thing is that we can store frequencies of elements in an n-size array, right? But the problem with this approach is that it takes space is not efficient. Also, the amount of time it takes to query, to answer the query is also quite a lot, because it can be as bad as n. If I give you second to say n/2, then you have to sum up all these frequencies and do this. So that's one issue with this. Or you could have stored an n cross n matrix where for the ith entry, you store the total frequency in that range of elements, right? So the problem with this is again space, though now query has become very efficient. And the last solution, as given by Piotr, was this. We implement count min or count sketches, whatever it is, okay? So now the time is again proportional to j minus I, because look, if I give you xij between, say, I give you, say, 2 and root n, for example, right? So now what will you ask me? Okay, give me an estimate for x2 tilde plus x3 tilde, which all we can generate in order one time by looking at some order log 1 over epsilon times, okay, not so we will have to look at roughly order, right? So depending on which sketch we use, either we will need 1 over epsilon square or 1 over epsilon times log n per entry to find this x2 tilde, okay? But the problem is, the worst problem is that the error will now magnify, right? Because now error will add up, because all we were guaranteed, if you notice here, all we guaranteed here is that for each entry, error is this, right? But you like your error of this range also to be proportional to epsilon. You don't want your error to just blow up, because if I just did blindly the way you suggested, so there are two issues. First is the time also will be proportional to the size of the query, like j minus I, and errors also might add up. So it could be as bad as alpha times epsilon mod x1 or alpha times epsilon mod x2, right? So how do we handle this? Right? Look, so one way could be that, look, you make epsilon much smaller, that it doesn't matter. But if I make epsilon, so one could have been that my error term is say 1 over n, right? So I did already that, my epsilon, which I set, is some 1 over n. But then that the storage number of functions which you need is also a function of 1 over epsilon square. So you cannot just go and just add up these things, or you cannot make the count sketch with so I could have run this count sketch with epsilon fixed 1 over n, okay? But then my space has already taken order 1 n square log n or order n log n space. So that's not a good idea at all. And if I just chose small epsilon, then it just adds up. So there are simple solutions, but all of these simple solutions has some or other difficulty. So people came up with something extremely smart. I think there's a very smart solution by
Saket.
Yes.
Just maybe I'm missing something. We want to estimate the sum from xi to xj, right?
Yes.
So why don't we try to store the estimate from 1 to xi and 1 to x? Well, means 1 to xi for all I.
You could, but that will be order n space, right?
Yeah. But yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you could also do that. There's absolutely no issue with doing that. So we could do that. But the problem is that the space will still be very bad, right? Because
right.
It's like storing an array, right?
Yeah.
But why do but if you do that, you don't need to make any mistakes. You could just do that exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Right?
I just
So
showed the
now
sum.
that we have this leeway that we could be wrong, can we utilize that to do this efficiently is a question, like
Yes.
space wise, time wise, and everything wise. So this is a very simple question. Think of, I mean, forget about xi. Even if I give you numbers from 1 to n, no deletion, insertion, just insertion only, and then also this question is equally interesting. Okay, it's just that the count sketches or count min sketch allows you to also have deletion. But if we forget this moment and we just say, look, I'm getting some n numbers, okay, and I will give you these numbers in the streaming setting. And at the end, I will ask you the following questions. Given ij, give me efficiently a good estimate of all the sums between xi to xij. How do we do this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so let me introduce this beautiful idea of what is called, okay, so what I'm going to do, I will, before, this is a idea which is useful in computer science all the time. What you will do, so there's something called dyadic interval. So I will, before we go, let me explain to you the whole thing in English, and then we will do how to make it formal. Okay. So suppose we have this x1, x2, okay. 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 So what I mean by this, so suppose we have this x1, x2, x3, xn, right? These are my elements, right? And let's assume that n is like some 2 power k for, okay. Otherwise you can do. So you make a binary tree, okay? x3, x4, xn minus 1, xn, okay? You make this binary tree, and then next one, so on and so forth, okay? So basically, how many levels we will have? This is a complete binary tree. So we will have k log n level. At the bottom, we will have one, like singletons. Here, I will have, like, here, my object are like x1, x2 is one object. Okay? x1 comma x2 is one object. Here, x3, x4 is one object. Or let's say, okay? Or say x1 plus x2 is one object. x3 plus x4 is one object. xn minus 1 plus xn is one object. When I go up, I will have x1 plus x2 plus x3 or x4, or rather, let's say 1 comma 4, I will call it. Okay. Here, I will have now last 4 elements. So let's say n minus 3, n minus 3, n minus 4 to n. And so on and so forth. Here we will have 1 to n over 2 and n by 2 plus 1 to n, here n. Okay, so all 1 to n. Okay, so like if you ask me for concrete example, and suppose you had, if you would have write dyadic interval for say 1 to 8, so the dyadic interval will be 1, 2, 3, dot, 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 8. These are of length 2 power 0. Then I will merge these two, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 5, 6, 7, 8 of length 1. Then 1 to 4, 5 to 8 of length 2 power 2. 1 to 8 of length 2 power 3. So these are the dyadic intervals. Okay. So this is my whole idea. Okay. Now, what I would like to do. So first of all, what I would like to do now, as an algorithm, I would like to have dyadic intervals. Like I would like to maintain this binary tree. Okay. Forget now how big this binary tree is, but all this. What we are able to do at any point of time is what your count min sketch gives you. If you notice x1 tilde, x2 tilde, you can generate it as and when you want. Right? This is what it can generate. Okay. Now, what I will like to do is that I would not like to use one count sketches or a count. Okay. I will like to use one count sketches for every level. Here, I will have one level. Here, I will have one level. So on and so forth. Okay. So I will have a dyadic interval. Like I will have what you call, I will have one sketch per level. Okay. Okay. Now, what will the sketch here will store? Okay. So what will it give me an estimate for? So I will ask him, forget about implementation at this point of time. Okay. I will ask him, okay, so the leaf level gives me estimate for x1 to xn minus tilde. But at the second level, I will ask him, okay, you give me an estimate for x1 plus x2. This is what I will ask him for estimate. Next one, I will ask him an estimate for x3 plus x4. And whatever I will ask him, give me an estimate for x1 minus 1 to xn. Okay. So this is what the second level guy will do. What will the third level guy will do? It will give me an estimate for x1 plus x2 plus x3 plus x4, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, what I would like to do, so this is what I will like to do. Okay. Now, why it is helpful? Even if I did all these things, I mean, why it is helpful? Okay. So what I will do, which is not very evident, is that if you give me any continuous interval, I can break down that as one of these, like some of these intervals. Okay.
Log n min, right?
We'll prove that. Okay. But that will be an idea. But what I will like to do, that you gave me you will give me an I comma j. Okay. So now I have to compute xij. This is what you wanted to estimate for. What I will do now, I will write it down as some disjoint union of dyadic intervals. Okay. Or think of this way, that you have maintained, like, so you have somehow access to all these distinct sums. Okay. And you are writing xij as summation of these distinct sum. Okay. Okay. Now what happens is that okay, now what happens is that now given xij, you have written down as sum of some things, some numbers which you have computed. Okay. And now imagine yourself that each of these numbers is basically epsilon, so like true. Okay. So suppose whatever this number is, say A, B, in truth, D, E, right? Now I will tell you that, okay, what I will give you is A plus epsilon times log n of A, two interval, right? And then I will give you B plus epsilon times log n, say AD, say, or suppose dot, 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 there are some L. So forget log n, epsilon over L, forget this, L, and whatever it is, say Z, okay? Z plus epsilon L mod B2 and okay, in fact, what I will give you is not this. Actually, I will give you with respect to X, which is the overall norm. whatever norm you want. Okay. Now, if I add these things, what will I get? I will get xij for sure, plus I will get some additive term, right? What will it be? It will be epsilon times mod x2, which is great. If I can do this, this will be great. So if L is like order log n, right? If L is like order log n, then that will be great for us, because then maybe we don't need to increase space far too much. Okay? Increase space far too much, but with small amount of space, we will be able to manage. Okay? So that's the overall idea of doing this. So first, let's try to prove that why, what are dyadic intervals are. So I already explained to you what dyadic intervals are. And how do you prove that given any interval I comma j, which is continuous within some range, how do you show that it can be broken down? So L is like at most 2 log n actually. Okay, we'll see in a minute. Okay, so notice that I comma j is a dyadic interval range if j minus I plus 1, the length is 2 power k, and 2 power k divides I minus 1. Or in other sense, you can think of this that it starts at some j times 2 power k plus 1 and ends at j plus 1 2 power k. This is it, right? So every range is like of this nature, right? So if you, okay, and what I would like to show that every interval ij, like this is continuous interval, can be expressed as disjoint union of at most 2 log n dyadic intervals. And here's your algorithm. Example, let's do 1838. So this is an interval, like sum. And what I would like to do, so what I will do, greedily find the longest possible dyadic range from the start of the range. Okay, and repeat on what remains. Since we have one length dyadic intervals, we can always do this into the range, but can we do something bigger, right? That's a question. So if I start with 18, what is the longest range starting from 18? Can I think of one of the dyadic intervals? Anybody?
What is range, Sak?
What is range?
No,
range,
what is it from 1
yeah,
to?
starting from 18.
No, 1 to, this is 18 to 13 in the interval. 1 to how much?
Say 1 to 256, doesn't matter. Right? Let's say 1 to
so
256.
18 to 32. So 18 to 32, right?
18, can 18 start, can 18 be a starting point? Is any 2 power k divides this except 2 power 0? Right?
18 would be a singleton.
So 18 has to be singleton, right? Okay. So now 18 has gone. So what is left now? 19 to 38. What will we do of 19 to 38?
19, 20 will be a bound. I mean, will be a range, and then from 20 we can go to 24.
Yeah, so 19 to 20 will be, so now 19 to 20 is gone. Then we have left is 21 to 38. Then we will be able to get 21 to 24. Right? And okay. So, okay, now 25 to 38 is left. So what can we say? I think we can have 25 to 32. Right?
Yes.
See? Okay. Now we have 32 to 38 is left. So we can have 33 to 36 and then 37 to 38. Okay? Is that fine? Okay.
Yes.
Right? So I am just saying that at most two dyadic ranges of any length in the canonical decomposition. Let's see. This is of length how much? 1. Right? This is of length 2. How many of length 2 are there? How many of length 2 are there? This is 1 and this is 2. Okay, how many of length 4 are there? And this is of length 8. Right? So I want to say that at most two dyadic ranges of any given length in the canonical decomposition. Okay? If I show, if this is true, then you are done, because how many lengths we have created? Log n lengths, right? So if for any particular length you only have 2 intervals, then the total number of things you will need is at most 2 log n. Am I right? Okay, so now let's prove this, okay, formally, okay? But I will give you a basic idea. This is not something very hard. So just, and this is useful in many, many settings. So it is good to know this trick, okay? So I want to show that every interval ij in xy, a dyadic interval, okay, can be expressed as disjoint union of at most 2 log n dyadic intervals. For now, let's just to understand, let's believe that xy is like some 1, n. Okay. Why I need xy, some x comma y, you will see because of the induction hypothesis. So you induct on the length of xy. Base case, suppose n is 1, then this is obvious, right? Because then only one interval can be there and you can write it as 2, at most 2. So let's assume that n is like 2 power k plus 1. Now, interval in the range 1 by 2 power k or 2 power k plus 1, 2 power k plus 1, comma 2 power k can be covered with at most 2 log n by 2 intervals by induction hypothesis. So they are like, so if you have any I comma j which is completely contained inside this range or completely contained inside this range, they can be covered with 2 log n over 2 intervals by induction hypothesis. So now, so what happens now is that this is your 1 and this is your n, or this is your n by 2. Now your interval crossed somewhere. So this is your interval I comma j. So now I break it here. Right? I break it here, I break it here. So partition the interval at the midpoint. First interval is like I 2 power k and the second interval will be 2 power k plus 1 comma j. Now you apply induction hypothesis on each. So how much it will be? It will be log 2 log n by 2 plus 2 log n by 2, which is at most 2 times 2 times 2 log n minus 1, right? Because log n by 2 and everything is in base 2. So this is nothing but log n minus 1, right? So this is like 4. Is this correct? What I needed? I needed 2 log n, right? Am I getting 2 log n? I don't think so.
Saket?
Yes?
Can I try to
No,
give a
there's no 2 inside the bracket. In the less than or equal to afterwards.
No, this.
No. Sorry, it's fine. Yeah, it's there. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, then I think I did something. Okay. So 2 into, so this will be 4 log n minus 4, which is not what I wanted, right?
Saket,
Yes.
can I try to give another argument for log 2 log n?
Like, yes, please tell me.
So, as the interval is continuous, all the vertices, now think about the tree that you have drawn.
Yes.
All the vertices you are storing has to be continuous in the level, one after the other, right? If you have selected 3 of them, that means you have selected at least 2 siblings. So instead of selecting 2 siblings, I could have selected their parent.
Yeah, something of this nature should work. Okay. But I try to do something very formally and I think I messed it up. Okay.
Yeah, so that should be the case. Like if you go back to the
so this is clear that this is what I was trying to do in my greedy algorithm, right? Because if you found 2 consecutive guys, so if you start from left to right, you cannot have 2 consecutive guys of the same length.
Yeah.
You get my point? Exactly. You cannot have to, so it will goes on increasing and it will goes on decreasing. Okay. So that is the intuition at least I had. And I try to make it formal. Okay, I'll check a formal proof. Okay, but for now, let's just believe me that every interval I comma j in xy can be expressed at this joint at most 2 log n dyadic intervals. Okay. Okay, I think there is. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, so we will imagine a binary tree over n, and any interval I comma j can be broken up into order log n disjoint dyadic intervals. So we'll create one sketch data structure per level of binary tree, say counter data structure. So what is an order log n counter data structures we have? Now, what will be the leader of any dyadic interval is the smallest Hamiltonian, right? So for example, left endpoint. So example 1 is the leader in the interval 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, whenever it delta comes, now we need to do some implementation, right? So this is what you're getting, right? Now you don't have one data structure, you have several data structures, right? Several data structures, right? Now you look at it, this is an index. You know that at each level, what will be its leader, right? You can know its leader, right? And if you know its leader, you go there and you make the changes accordingly, right? So what I mean by accordingly is like, okay, so suppose we had say 1, 2, right? And say suppose 2 came, right? So now when 2 came, I need to make changes to the bottommost. So that is like 2, 2 data structure, I will go and make changes. In the level below, after that, I have to make changes to 1, 2. What I mean, so I will go wherever 1 is, and I will not only make changes. So think of this way, that for every dyadic interval at that particular level, we have a location for all those elements. So in particular, let me. So what is happening? So if you recall, how does the count data structure works? The count data structure works is like h1, h2, we had d hash functions, and we had 1 to w, right? And so whenever I comma delta t comes, right? So we look at where h1 of I goes, where h2 of I goes, ... hd of I goes, okay? So now, based on that, I make changes, right? I either add signed sum, or I add just the change in the delta t to each of this term, right? Now what happens? So this is great. Now suppose, so this is the data structure at the bottom. What will the data structure on the next? I will still have h1 to hd, say 1 to w, okay? Now what happens? So I have that same buckets, But now I will do slightly differently. What I mean by this is that suppose H2 H I delta Tk, and suppose I is 2 and I'm at the second level. Where should I make a change? Where should I go and sum? So I will say, okay, where should the 2 will be mapped? Well, for 2, I'm not going to map it to H1I, right? So I will map it, okay, I said, find the leader of I, right? Find the leader of I. What is the leader of I? Okay, which dyadic interval does it belongs to, right? It is very easy to find by the definition. So suppose I got I prime. Now I will go to H1 of I prime, and there I will be adding or subtracting delta T. H2 of I prime, where I will be doing these kind of things. Okay, so this is what I mean, that at each level for this particular I, you find its leader, let's say I prime, and you go and make changes to that data structure accordingly. So this is what is happening at each different level. So this is how we are going to implement this algorithm. Okay. So this is what I would try to explain to you, that what happens at each level of the data structure. So suppose you had 2, -5. So second needs to be made, change it at all intervals, right? Bottom level, second level, third level. So think of this way is that at the second level, 1, 2 is treated as same object. At the next level, 1, 2, 3, 4 is treated as same object, so on and so forth. And if you notice at the top, I mean, look, I could at the top, I mean, all the nth location, like all the 1 to n is going to be get and summed up into one number. Okay, so this is how we will do this. But look, this tree is quite huge. This tree could have as many as order n nodes, right? So absolutely, we cannot store this, right? So what are we doing? So as I explained to you, we'll create one sketch data structure per level of binary tree. Output estimate x tilde ij by adding estimates for order log n dyadic intervals that ij decomposes into. And to manage error, we will choose epsilon equal to epsilon log n. So the total space will be like order alpha log n over epsilon, where alpha is space for single level sketch. Okay. So what I did not explain to you is so how will you implement this algorithm, right? We are not going to create this data structure, right? I'm not going to create this binary tree or anything. So what you will do, you've given a query, right? Given a query I, j, what will I do? I will apply my greedy algorithm. Okay. I will apply my greedy algorithm. Okay. Broken down into these dyadic intervals. Okay. I did. Okay. Now that I have broken down into this dyadic interval, what will I do? For each of them, I have a data structure and I will query its estimate. I will query its estimates. I'll query its estimates and sum them up and output you. This is my whole algorithm. So now I don't need to store anything. Once I have this log n data structures, I'm good. Okay. It means how much space it will take, right? To manage error, we need to do epsilon equal to epsilon by log n. So the total space will be like order alpha log n over epsilon, where alpha is the space for single level sketch, right? So how much, so if I use count sketch, what will be alpha? Alpha will be something like 1 over epsilon square times log n times log m, right? And now you multiply with another log n over epsilon. So total space will be like roughly 1 over epsilon cube log n log square n by log n, right? So you are able to come up with an estimate of these objects by just an extra additional factor of log n and 1 over epsilon, okay? And if you would have used count sketch, which will only work for a strict turnstile model, then you could have saved 1 epsilon here. That will be like 1 over epsilon square, okay? Any question? Okay, so this was about range queries, okay? Next, so the thing which I want you to take away from here is the dyadic intervals, okay? This is a very important object to have. And if you know about segment tree, it is very similar to segment trees. And to manage error in log n, you can only set epsilon prime to be some epsilon by log n or poly log n. So this is second thing. So you have to build your object into, so whenever you are going to do several things, errors will add up. To manage these errors in the world which we are living in of poly log n world, you can only have this kind of poly log n objects. Anything more than that is could create a trouble for you, okay? So these are like simple range queries. If you want to estimate something, then you can do this with this trick. Now, I want to talk about something called point queries. So generally people teach first point queries and then they teach range queries, but I decided to teach a different way, a slightly different way. I'll explain to you in a minute, because I think this is a bit more easier to explain after doing dyadic intervals, okay? So what is our heavy hitters problem? So I want to find all items I such that xi is alpha times mod x1 for some fixed alpha in 0, 1, okay? So I want to output all the numbers, all xi, right, such that it is heavy, in the sense that it is like some good fraction of my magnitude. And look, I'm talking in terms of x1. You could also talk in terms of x2, but that is slightly more harder to implement, so I will not talk about this. So we will only, so for heavy hitters of this, we will be using count min sketch. Okay, so let's say what will be an approximate version of this. So I want to output any I such that xi is at least alpha minus epsilon times mod x1, okay? Now why I want to do this? So I would like to, because the sketches give us a data structure so that for any I in n, we get an estimate xi tilde of xi with additive error. So if I want to, let's say, compensate that additive error, I ask, okay, you output elements which is slightly, so what I'm saying that, suppose you wanted all the elements with which had frequency, say, or which had x1. So if I ask you, give me all the elements with, definitely you will output all the elements which had half of x1. You will output more things for sure, but you will definitely be outputting what I wanted, right? So you try to compensate these things by slightly asking yourself for an approximate version. Say, okay, you set your epsilon accordingly. Okay, give me all those elements whose frequency is alpha minus epsilon times mod x1. Okay, so what is one trivial algorithm? I can go over each I and check if xi tilde is alpha minus epsilon times mod x1 and output you. So what is the problem with this algorithm? Space wise, it is not taking anything, right? You anyway you can generate xi tilde on the fly, right? So it's perfectly fine. But what is the issue with this algorithm? What is bad about this algorithm? Let's ask that. How much time does it take?
Order n.
Yes. So it could take as bad as order n because we are going through all xi tilde. But how many such elements are there? Xi tilde. Like they're roughly order 1 over alpha, right? Alpha minus epsilon, say, right? Only these many elements will have xi tilde more than this, right? So if alpha and epsilon are say constant, like I have constant number of elements which are heavy hitters, but I'm taking linear amount of time to output you those heavy hitters, right? It will be interesting to find these heavy hitters, right? Proportional to the time, which is the number of such elements. Okay. So as I told, this is very expensive. So we need an additional data structure to speed up our computation and reduce time sketch to the proportional to 1 over alpha polylog n. Okay. It's more tricky for count sketch, but so I will not do that. Okay. So what do you think we could do this? Does some idea from the previous range query algorithm helpful? Look, all we need to ask this question. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to maintain a direct binary tree over n similar to range queries. Okay. Okay. And so this is my okay. And so per level, we have a data structure which returns me so suppose I'm storing the frequencies or like some of those frequency x. So what I'm storing here, I'm storing x tilde I comma j at this level of particular interval. So for example, here I will be storing all the sum. Here I will be storing the sum of 1 over n by 2. Here n by 2 plus 1, so on and so forth. Okay, so now I will do a BFS. Okay, now I will do a, so suppose this tree was given to you. Okay, so how will you output whatever we wanted? So we can do the following. The reason why I'm doing, okay, so I will ask myself, okay, is this, I go, okay, I am here. We query whether the sum of, is this frequency more than alpha times x1? Fine. Now I will ask myself, okay, the children, is this guy's sum of the frequency more than alpha times x1? If yes, then I will also go here. I will also ask the other children, oh, is your also frequency more than this? If it is yes, then I know. But look, these are disjoint interval. So if both of the frequencies of these guys are more than something, then there is a possibility of having some heavy hitter here. Some heavy hitter here. But suppose at this point of time, I get that no, I get no. What is the meaning? So what was it storing? It was basically storing the sum of all those xi's which are below him as a leaf. Now, if the sum itself, estimate of the sum itself is less than alpha times mod x1, is there any hope of going below here? Right? Is there, like, can we find a heavy hitter in this subtree at all? if the sum of all the elements here is strictly less than say alpha times mod x1, there's absolutely no hope of finding any heavy hitter in this subtree. So what I will do? Discard. So this is why I call that this is like a BFS. It is actually a BFS. It's a truncated BFS. So I look at my children. If some children does not satisfy the property, I forget it. I only add those children in my stack or whatever you want to, stack or queue. Okay? Yeah, I add in the queue only those children who satisfy this property. So this is basically BFS, right? Is there any question on like how does the actual implementation will happen? But suppose I gave you this tree like physically, then we could apply this algorithm and output all those xi's, right? And xi's. Now, why it is the running time and this and that, we'll worry about this later. But is the algorithm clear? How to maintain this within the space bound which I'm claiming, I will explain in a minute. But is the algorithm clear? Anybody? Any question? Okay. I hope it means you people are understanding or I'm saying something not correct. Either way, fine. Okay. So now we can't construct this entire tree as a whole, but we need to do this tree on fly. And how will we do this on tree on fly? So we start with a root, which is the entire interval. On subsequent node, check if any of your children have their sum of frequencies lesser than the threshold. If true, do not construct that part of the tree. So you're going to construct this tree only. So I'm here. I say, hey, I ask, if I know myself, if I know my current interval, then I know my children interval is like half and half, right? For this, I have a data structure. I check. Is this sum more than this? Is this sum more than this? If this is there, like, so I'm just doing this BFS by asking this question at any point of time. If this happens, then I put that children inside this tree. Otherwise, I don't do anything. So once I don't do anything, I'm not creating any subtree below it. Okay? So you just do not construct this tree at all. Now the question arises, well, why this tree is small? Right? So notice one thing. How many nodes in the leaves are heavy hitters for me? Roughly order 1 over alpha leaves. Right? So basically, what are you constructing? You are constructing, right? Basically, what are you constructing? You're constructing the tree or subtree, which are the heavy hitters, and the depth of this tree is like roughly log n, right? Maybe like this, right? So this is the part of the tree you are constructing. But you might ask question that, well, I might go far too deep and then realize that none of these children has this property. Can that happen? How can we take care of that? You get my question? Look, if this is true, that we will definitely be creating this part of the subtree because of the heavy hitter definition. But what happens? Look, at any point of time, you can charge. Look, so some point of time, suppose this is a query which you asked. This is a query which you asked. And after that, you said, oh, let's not create this tree. But you can charge this query to its parent here. Right? Up until now, you have followed this tree because we have the root. If there is no, you never move beyond the root. So now, for all the extra queries you ask, you charge it to parent. Right? So you know, since it's a binary tree, the people, unnecessary questions which you have asked, is proportional to the number of nodes in this search tree. So the total size of this tree which you will generate is roughly order 1 over alpha times log n. So if you do this online BFS in some sense, and you create this order 1 over alpha times log n size search tree, which implies that the space required for the storing this binary tree is proportional to order log n 1 over alpha. Now, everything else remained the same as the range query algorithm. So the only thing which was different from the previous algorithm was how do we output these algorithms. So you can output, how do you output this heavy hitter? To output this heavy hitter, you run this BFS tree on the fly. You create this search tree, which is of the size order log n 1 over alpha. And so the total running time, total space will be like, this is an additive factor. This is not a multiplicative factor, right? Because, so the total running time will be like order. And as before, look, you need to output this. Again, you need to argue that you are not making too many mistakes at different levels. So to do that, everything else will remain like range query algorithm. So the total space will be again like roughly 1 over epsilon cube or epsilon square, because you're using count min. So 1 over epsilon square log square n log m plus log n time 1 over alpha. So this will be your total space required by this algorithm. So now you can implement this algorithm and you can output all the heavy hitters or all the elements who constitute a good fraction of total magnitude. Okay. Any question before we move to the next application? Okay. So if there is no question, then let's take 5 minutes break and then we'll come back and do our last application. At least we'll see, at least we will get started with our last application, which is sparse recovery. Okay. So I told you two very important and useful applications of count min and count data structure, which is quite useful, quite used in practice. And there are a lot of people who have done a lot of practical implementation of this. And if you search for these things on internet, you will find it. Or I have also added some of the practical applications or practically motivated these things on the website of the course. Okay. Okay. So let's look at our next application. I don't think we will be able to finish it today, but let's at least get started on this. So we are going to talk about what is called sparse recovery. So I think sparsity is very important theme in optimization, algorithms, and modeling. And sometimes data is often explicitly sparse. Example, graphs, matrices, vectors, document, as word vectors. And data is often implicitly sparse in a different representation. The data is right. So for example, let's say in signal processing, you have this sine waves, right? Right, and like this, whatever. Okay, and how do you represent this? Is basically you represent them as like you discretize them, right? And you write your x as x1, x2, dot dot dot, right? So this will be like x1, x1, x2, x3, so on and so forth. So if you notice, this vector x is not at all sparse. It is actually quite dense, right? Because this is like as time goes. But if you notice, if I told you this is a sine wave, right? Plus I told you what is the interval's length, right? Then you can create this x very simply, right? So sometimes how data is stored, the representation is explicitly sparse, right? And so this is a very important topic which finds application in like image processing, like databases and this. And even if you look at like what I mean by explicitly, like if you look at friendship graphs or the social network graphs, generally they tend to be extremely sparse because you're not going to make friends with millions of people. I mean, you have a good friends with only 10 people or 20 people. So generally these graphs or matrices or vectors or documents turns to be very, very sparse, and algorithmically we would like to explicitly make use of this. So what is our algorithmic goals? Take advantage of sparsity to improve performance like speed, quality, memory, etc. And find implicit sparse representation to reveal information about data. Example, topics in document, frequencies in Fourier analysis, and things like that. So I am not an expert on these things, but what I will teach you is an algorithmic question which is of extreme importance in big data. And the question is, so you are given a vector or signal x in Rn, and you want to find a sparse vector x, vector z, such that z approximates x. So more concisely, given x an integer k greater than or equal to 1, I would like to find z such that z has at most k non-zeros or non-zero entry. So that is what means that zeroth norm of z is at most k, and such that x minus z with respect to some p non is minimized for some p greater than or equal to 1. Okay? So is the question clear? So you're given a vector x, okay, an integer k greater than or equal to 1, and you want to find a z such that z had at most k non-zero entries, and you want to find z such that the norm x minus z is minimized for some p greater than or equal to 1. Okay. Do you think this problem is NP complete? Anybody? Or polytime? What do you think? What is your guess?
I think it is NP complete.
Okay. Anybody else?
Saket, you also should say for which P, right? And for
say P equal to 2, for example.
And K is the part of the input?
K is part of the input.
Yes, it should be NP complete.
No, it is not.
Oh.
It is polytime solvable. Because it's a vector, right? In fact, this is polytime for any P actually, for P greater than or equal to 1. Okay, I just told you P. So both K and P are, say, suppose part of this. So basically, optimum offline solution is Z picks the largest K coordinate of X in absolute value, and that's it. Right? I mean, so do you believe this optimum offline solution? Right? So given X, I just pick the largest K coordinate, right? Because I want to minimize, right? I want to minimize X minus Z0. So I zero out the largest K coordinate and we are happy. Right? It requires proof, but I leave that as a good exercise. Okay? Say P equal to 2, it is definitely obvious. Because, I mean, what will be the term, right? Look, what will be an error term, right? You cannot do better than, so for example, what I mean by this is that suppose you had 0, 10, 1, 9, 0.1, right? Minus 0.2, 2, 0.001, 5, or whatever it is, right? Now, look, if I would like to minimize this term, I would like to maximize at the coordinate where I can zero out, right? Because it is a square term, if you are going to add some other terms anywhere else, right? So for example, if I give k equal to 3 and say p equal to 2, the best answer will be 0, 10, I don't put here anything, 0, 9, and 0, 0, 0, 0, and 5, right? Because I have zeroed out the maximum amount of term which I could, and so this is my answer. Okay, so offline solution for these problems are very easy. But if I did not give you x, but I gave you x in R n cross say n, so I gave you matrix, and then I asked you this question, then this problem is NP complete for almost all p. Okay, but for a vector, this is polytime solvable. Okay. Okay. So what are we interested in? So we want to do this in streaming setting. Okay. And what will be my setting? We will have turnstile string. So positive, negative, x is really anything, and p equal to 2, and we want to use space proportional to output, right? I do not want to use, like, so you are asking me to give me a vector. So x is coming in streaming setting. You have given me k. I know my k. So basically what I would like to do, I would like to think of in a way that offline solution is like picking k, top k in absolute value, top k coordinates. So in some sense, what I would like to do is that I would also like to pick top k coordinates, right, of this x in streaming. This is my question, right? So my question is, could be identify k top, say, what do you call, k top coordinates in streaming, right? Now, what does count, min, sketch, or anything does? If you notice, it is basically each xi is giving me, what is that called? Estimate of each xi, right? Now we saw heavy hitters algorithm. We saw, right? So what is heavy hitters is doing? Basically, it is finding those xi's which are heavy or which is largest. But now, so it seems useful that for this problem, one of these sketches, in some sense, we should be able to use it. Okay, and that is what we will see in a minute. Okay, so let me define my formal objective function. Okay, so this is what is my formal objective function is. What I would like to minimize, right? So this is under L2 norm. Okay, so I would like to find z who has at most k coordinate, and I would like to minimize x minus z by 2, and this is my error term. What is an error? Like whatever this is error term. So for example, let's say, right? So notice that this error term is interesting only when it is small compared to say mod x minus z2, like mod x2, right? This is only interesting. For instance, when x is uniform, say all xi is for all I, then x2 is like root n, right? Norm. But what you will definitely incur an error of root n minus k, right? But you also notice that if you're given a vector x which has at most k non-zero coordinates. What is the meaning of then? Then definitely error will be 0, right? Because you just take the same vector, right? And that, so what will it be? Like mod x minus z, you have taken the same vector, so all you have got is a 0 vector, right? So you will get 0. So you can show, so this is error is 0 if and only if mod x is less than or equal to k, and hence related to distinct element detection in some sense. Okay. So I would like to use sparse recovery for various other purposes also. So the kind of theorem which will prove is the following. Okay. So there's a linear sketch. It's a linear sketch, and hence it also works in this deletion setting and everything, whose size is like k over epsilon square polylog that returns z such that definitely z0, z has at most k coordinate, and with high probability, it is not too far away from x. So what is this? It is like, it's a multiplicative guarantee of one, like it is whatever the error is, like it is at most 1 plus epsilon times the error which you will definitely incur, right? Look, whatever it is, you will definitely incur this error, right? I mean, I have taken minimization. So this is my error term. I cannot do better than that, right? Any algorithm can only do as good as this term because I'm taking z over, I'm ranging z over all possible, what do you call, vector who has at most k ones. Now, what I'm going to do, so if you notice here, space is proportional to the desired output. And assumption is that k is typically quite small compared to n, the dimension of x. And based on, and this will be based on count sketch. So notice, what is it supposed to return me if I started with x that has at most k non-zero entries? What will happen then? What happens when x has at most k1, k non-zero entries? Then what happens? What is error term then? What is this?
Zero.
Exactly. Then what are you able to do then? What are this lemma tells? Then it tells me I'm able to this. So with very high probability, what have you done? You have recovered x. Right? You have been able to recover x exactly in some sense with very high probability. Right? So if you have x is k sparse vector, so from here what can we say? If x is k sparse vector, right? Then if x is k sparse vector, then we reconstruct it exactly. Okay. Now notice that if I wanted to run my algorithm on, say, for example, on graphs which has a small degree, like 3, 4, 5, I don't know what, then if I write an incidence vector or whatever vector, how many entries will I have? Some 4, 5. So if I run this algorithm on that, I will be able to recover all its neighbors in certain sense. So that is one kind of application people use for sparse recovery, in the sense that if I'm able to represent a vector where the number of coordinates or entries which are non-zero is bounded, then I can apply this algorithm to completely recover my whole thing. So for example, if I had a bounded degree graph, then probably I can use this data structure in certain sense to recover everything completely. We will see its application in like in the streaming algorithm for vertex cover or matching, like in the sense of parameterized setting as we go further. So it's a very powerful data structure. Okay, and this is based on count sketch. Okay, so here is our algorithm. Okay, so look, I'm going to use count sketch, nothing more than that, okay? Algorithm wise, like even if you don't understand the analysis, because analysis is basically analysis of count sketch on a steroid, but this is how we do it, okay? I'll give you an intuitive idea. So here it is. So now, look, I want k coordinates. I want k guys to come out, not one guy. So I'm going to use roughly, as always, d times w, okay? But now w, the number of buckets, is going to be 3k over epsilon square. And what does count sketch gives us? An estimate for xi tilde for each I in n, and what I'm going to output. So how will I do this? I will output the k coordinates with the largest estimate. Okay, I will output the k coordinates with the largest estimate. Okay, so this is how I can. This is how. So as I told you before, right? I mean, space wise, I have taken this. Time wise, I'm not talking about time wise at this point of time. So if I give, so I can run over all I for I equal to 1 to n. Okay, what I will do, I can keep a heap, okay, which stores the k top candidates at any point of time, right? So I get another estimate xi tilde if it is larger than the okay, so I'm k top guy. So if it is larger than the minimum which is stored here among these k guys, I throw it out, I put it in. So this way I can store the k guys with just order k space and give you estimate. Of course, the running time is order n to output the vector, the desired vector z. Okay, but for now, let's forget about how can we do this even more efficiently. But suppose this is my algorithm. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use count sketch with certain parameters, right? I will have log n has functions with bucket size 3k over epsilon square, okay? And I will output the k coordinates with the largest estimate, okay? And the intuition is as before, is like, I believe that with w being some order k over epsilon square, the k biggest coordinate will spread out in their own buckets, okay? And rest of the small coordinates will spread out evenly. And we will have to refine the analysis of count sketch, okay? What do you call? Right? So notice that what is this xi tilde gives you? Xi tilde gives you estimate that xi minus xi tilde, right? Sorry, what I'm writing is less than equal to epsilon times 2 norm. This is what we prove. Okay, so we'll refine the analysis of count sketch to carefully analyze the two scenarios. What are the two scenarios if you notice? Look, if the vector x has far too many coordinates which are heavy and k is too small, I mean, then my error itself is too big that whatever I output, I will be okay. But the analysis becomes much more trickier when what the input vector itself is a good estimate for L2 norm. Then then it becomes very difficult to understand and analyze that situation, right? So for example, I mean let's say you had right 1 plus epsilon, 1 minus epsilon, 1 minus epsilon, 0 0 0. Now in this setting, like, there's not too much difference between 1 and 1 plus epsilon. There's not too much difference between 1 and 1 minus epsilon, right? And so suppose this is how the top k plus 15 guys, like first k plus 15 coordinates are between 1 and 1 minus epsilon. Now the algorithm may not necessarily give me an estimate which is like first top k candidates, but it could be anything from this k plus 15 coordinates, possibly, right? So algorithm need to do a little bit of more hard work when your input itself, like if you really remove the k coordinates, the estimate, the error term which comes after that is too small, right? Then I also need to produce a vector z which is too small in terms of its error, okay? So the theorem or the lemma which we will prove, so we will prove that if you take count sketch with W being 3k over epsilon square and D like order log n, then for all I in n with very high probability, this is the estimate we will have. Like xi tilde minus xi is at most epsilon root k and the error term, okay? Now notice that we are getting this extra root k here, which we didn't get in the analysis of before. And then suppose this is what the count sketch will give us. We will be able to prove that this is not very hard to prove. It is just a small tweak. Now, what do I know about this? So this is the second lemma which we'll prove, is that if you're given a two vectors xy in Rn, such that x minus y, mod x minus y in infinity norm is this. Do you know what is the meaning of infinity norm? It just means that you're given, say, x1, x2, xn, and y1, y2, yn, then coordinate wise, xi minus yi is less than this. This is what it means, right? So this is what is guarantee which is given by count sketch. And you should think of this y, okay, I will tell you, like, so then I'm telling you how to construct this z given this y, okay? How do I construct this z? I say, look, let y be this vector y1, y2, yn, and let t be the largest coordinate, k largest in absolute value coordinates, okay? So you take those coordinates and you zero out the rest of the coordinates, okay? This is how 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, right? So this is what the definition of this is. Where z is the vector obtained as follows: zi is yi for I in t, where t is a set of k largest in absolute value indices of y, and zi equal to 0 for I in t. Okay, so what we will show to you that, look, if you give me an output such that, like in the infinity norm, two vectors are very close to each other, and then if we take the top k vectors, then their second norm is also bounded by some 1 plus 5 epsilon some terms, okay, the error term. So once I have these two lemmas, we will be able to say that our algorithm is correct, right? Because our first lemma will guarantee that in terms of infinity norm, this happens. And the second, and then this lemma will tell, so we will apply, what will be our z? So this is what we constructed our z, right? So this is how we constructed our z. Output the k coordinates with the largest estimate. So basically, our z will be some, say, x2 tilde, maybe then 0, 0, 0, 0, x9 tilde, so on and so forth. So some top k candidate, top k largest estimate, I will put it, and the rest I will put it at 0, right? And what is a guarantee of x tilde? The guarantee of x tilde is that they are not too far away from xi. And so now if I get z the way I constructed for you, it will have the property that the z which you have constructed, it is like, it is k sparse and it is as close to the best which is possible, right? So algorithm is quite simple, but analysis requires a little bit of tricky argument. So this is what our, remember, this is what our count sketch algorithm is. And so we just do as before, and this is the, we don't want to do analysis now because it will take way more time than what I have at this point of time. But so is the algorithm clear? I will do analysis next time. but I would like you to at least know the algorithm very well. Okay, so we did nothing. Our algorithm just kept a count sketch, okay, and just outputted the k top estimate, and then it was able to. We will be able to show that this is a very good estimate with respect to if you wanted to minimize, if you wanted to find Z with at most k non-zero coordinates, and what is that called? And output something which is closer to X in terms of that. Okay, so this algorithm will do very well. So, and the last thing which we will do, which next lecture maybe, is I'll tell you, okay, and which will be the backbone. See, the analysis is quite dirty. Okay, and then one more interesting things which happens is that given a stream X, at the end you want to output a random I comma R, where I is okay, where I is some index in N and R in R. So the probability that I is in I is proportional to this. And so, for example, if P would have been equal to 0, then what are we trying to do? We want to output one of the coordinates which is non-zero with uniform probability. Okay, this is what we would like to do, right? So, and this is very important because, say for example, I wanted to know whether given a vertex, is there an edge incident to that, right? So I will have a vector. So as I told you before several times, so this is generally in graph theory, we will take n choose 2 coordinates. So where for a particular vertex, if say I will have this n choose 2 coordinate, and if I comma j is an edge, I put 1, and there are different ways of putting it, but suppose I put 1 comma 0, and I wanted to know, this vector will never be constructed because this is n choose 2 length vector, but I would like to know whether for this particular vertex, is there an edge incident to this? So then basically what I would like to know is that, is there a coordinate here which is non-zero? So generally the way we would like to use it, we would like to generate one of these coordinates which is non-zero uniformly at random. So that is what I mean when I say sampling from strings with proportion to the P, where P is some norm or something. So these are the kind of questions which will follow from the sparse recovery algorithm. Okay, so this is what we will see next time. I will give you a little bit of more intuition or the ideas why the sparse recovery algorithm works, the correctness. Okay, I would recommend that you look at the slides for the formal proof because it is just messy and it is just basically doing what I already did. And then we will start up, then we will see its application in signal processing, at least a little bit what I know, and compressed sensing. And then finally we'll move to how to do uniform sampling from strings proportion to some, some norm, okay? And with that, we will end all these notions of frequency and this and that, whatever we learned, and then move to dimension reduction. So that's the plan for the Wednesday lecture is, and hopefully we will be able to move to dimension reduction from there onwards. Okay, so any question before I end? Okay, if there is no question, then let's meet on Wednesday.